A new report confirms a stark racial gap in city spending on contracts for construction, services, or procurement. For companies headed by women or people of color, the spending was about 11% of the total. For companies with Black or Latinx ownership, it was only 1.2%. But the study also provides new information about the causes of the gap and potential remedies, including new goals and measures recently announced by Mayor Walsh. To tell us about the study and some of the next steps is the Director of Equity and Inclusion for the Mayor's Office of Economic Development, Celina Barrios-Millner. Thank you very much for being with us, Celina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so now I'm going to start with the numbers in this study. I guess when we saw the information about this report, I thought at first this sounds a little familiar, but maybe even a little worse. So, how bad is it the way things stand right now?
I think that we've known what our discretionary spend has been for the past few years, and we know that that there are more people out there that would like to contract with the city than are currently doing so. But what the study really provides is the information of who's out there that we could be doing business with, because you can't assess whether you're doing well or not unless you know what the pool of available vendors are. So I think that to us was the most surprising, was the availability that's out there, that we really should be that should be more represented in our contracting.
Well, part of the study process was, I think, talking to some of the contractors or potential contracts. What did you learn from them?
One of the aims of the study is to analyze barriers to contracting with the city, but also to analyze marketplace barriers as well. And so the study came out with findings on both based on interviews and surveys and testimony provided. And so in the marketplace, we unfortunately know what these barriers are, but it's worth noting access to capital continues to be a huge barrier for local businesses and diverse businesses. Access to education. They have even heard anecdotally about businesses doing the same type of work as white-owned businesses, but generating less revenue. So these are all really significant marketplace barriers that limit a business's ability to grow and be competitive for all opportunities, but specifically for city opportunities as well. I think in terms of barriers they identified in doing business with the city in particular, we heard a lot about contract size, and the contracts are too large for a smaller business to get their foot in the door. The issue of there being prompt payment, is an important one, and just navigating the process itself. Even though the process is online, it's still really difficult to put bids together, put proposals together, and navigate that process. So we heard a lot about that.
You mentioned contract size. What is it about the size that makes it so hard for some of the firms you want to include to compete?
I think an example, just to illustrate the point, if you think about, for example, snow removal, the different capacity and scale you would need to be, the single provider of snow removal services for a city the size of Boston, versus if that contract is divided by region, or by, you're doing sidewalks and you're doing streets, or, there's many different ways to split up contracts. And so I think, best practices have always been that you divide those contracts up, because especially if there's snow, it's hard to make your way across the whole city. But that's just an example where if you have, 2 trucks, you can do a lot. You can do all the sidewalks for the schools in a particular district or area, but if you had to bid on that for the whole city, you might need 50 trucks, and that might just be too far out of your reach. So I think, contract size is really important for smaller businesses. And I don't want to conflate small and diverse, but we do know that a lot of minority and women-owned businesses are smaller. But there are many large ones that can compete for the large contracts as well. But I just want to make sure we don't conflate the two.
What about the legal landscape here? Because you can diagnose a problem in race-conscious terms, but when it comes to remedies, you have to think differently, right?
Absolutely. And part of what the study lays out are best practices for inclusive procurement. And some of those are, we now have the legal basis for establishing these race and gender specific goals, but we also should continue a lot of the work we're doing in terms of affirmative marketing, making sure people know about the opportunities, making systems easier to navigate, which helps everybody, right? Not just small or diverse businesses. But we do have a lot of, in Massachusetts, there are a lot of public contracting laws, which make it hard for us to be nimble and flexible and to really be proactive in choosing diverse vendors. Even once we have the disparity study in place, it's still a very complex legal landscape to be able to implement fully.
Well, to get a contract, you need to have the workforce, you need to have some equipment or some facilities, but you also need to come up with money up front, the deposit, the bonding. That seems to be a problem with a lot of potential contracts. What about possible solutions for that?
Yeah, and we look at that. There's two sort of best practices in addressing that. One is making sure that our contract requirements are in line with the contract itself. Sometimes there's sort of legacy language that's used. And, for a contract, it may require $1 million worth of bonding because it's happening inside a building, but you're not building a new building that requires that bonding, right? So there's some legacy language that we need to clean up and make sure that the bonding and insurance requirements are in line with what the contract actually is, breaking up the contract so that you don't need to have as high of a bonding or insurance. And the other piece is helping businesses get that bonding and insurance. And so we do want to set up a fund where we can help businesses qualify and have that as a tool to bid on larger contracts. And so I think it's both helping people get the bonding that they need, making sure that what we're requiring is actually necessary.
I want to ask you about the mayor's new goal here, an aspirational goal of 25% for firms owned by women or people of color. Philadelphia has a goal of 35% for what they call minority firms, and people there say it's not enough. So what's the right number?
Yeah, I mean, the number really, I think, is specific to the city you're in, the marketplace you're in. We have a totally different business community than any other city. And I think the other piece that's important to keep in mind is every disparity study and every city's program is different. So a lot of programs, for example, will only have a disparity study for construction, right? And so they set goals for construction. This study and these goals we're setting are comprehensive for every type of contract. So it includes professional services, which a lot of cities don't even touch. So it includes design, construction, goods, services, everything. And so, and each of those will be based on the availability for each of those industries. And so our study and our remedy is very comprehensive, which I think a lot of people don't realize when they're trying to compare. It's not really apples to apples. And we have a different city. We do hope that with our investments and work that we continue to grow the capacity and grow the pool of available vendors, which is ultimately how you create a healthy economy.
Well, one thing the study shows is it seems to be somewhat easier to include these firms as subcontractors as opposed to being prime contractors. So how would you get some of the prime contractors to include these firms as subcontractors, at least more often?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really where the race and gender specific goals come in. And so you would say for a specific contract, a successful bidder will show how they're going to, let's take 10 and 15, if that happens to be the goal for that contract, how they're going to contract 15% of the contract with women-owned businesses and 10% with minority-owned businesses. And so they might say, we're going to bring in these 10 businesses and we can get to 8% for the minority goal. And then another bidder might themselves be a prime that's a minority-owned business. And so they'll get to 10%. So looking at those two proposals, you would say, oh, I'm going to go with this firm that is actually exceeding the goal or meeting the goal. And I think that then it becomes a market incentive to support diverse businesses, because if it makes it a more advantageous proposal, then we've seen this in other jurisdictions, in Massport and other parts of the state, that when there's goals in place, people strive to meet them.
Well, the mayor's measures include steps to almost change the mindset in City Hall, get people more focused on equity. You can put maybe some equity language in your requests for proposals for contracts. Its language, its mindset, does that really translate into results, you think?
Absolutely. I think that we've been doing a lot of this work prior to the disparity study, and one of the areas that we worked on is to make sure that for any procurement the city does, that they included a certified vendor from our certified business directory of women, minority, and other certified businesses. So the way that we do that, yes, it's mindset and culture, but it's like literally, like, we won't cut the check if you don't do this. And if you need help, we're here to help you. And so involving the equity and inclusion unit in the procurement process, I think we've made a lot of great progress. It's not so much about mindset, it's about creating the habit and the routine that this is how business is done all the time. And I think that we've done a lot over the past few years to establish that. And now we have an additional tool that a lot of buyers are actually eager to use.
Finally, we have a little time here, but I guess you should have a chance to note that there will be some briefings about these steps coming up.
Absolutely. Yes, we have 3 community briefings that will be held on Zoom next week. This week, tomorrow, March 3rd. We have 2 sessions, one at noon and one at 6 p.m. And Friday, we have a session at 8 a.m. You can get the links for those on our new webpage, which is boston.gov/disparity study. And they'll be held on Zoom, and they'll be multilingual. We'll have simultaneous interpretation, and we'll also be recording for folks that can't make it.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to walk us all through that.
Thank you so much.
That was Celina Barrios-Millner from the Mayor's Office of Economic Development. We'll have more news in just a moment.